Welcome to Perspectives with Asima Silva. Today we have another extremely interesting guest, Mohammed Missouri. He's the Executive Director of Jetpac. We're going to get into what exactly Jetpac does, and he has a great announcement this year that he worked with getting something recognized by a lot of people in our community will be very, very happy to hear. So before I waste any more time, let me thank you for being our guest and coming here tonight to talk to us. I wanted to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Jetpac.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Asima. So Jetpac Resource Center was founded back in 2016 by then City Councilor Nadeem Mazen. The goal there was he had just, he had just done a really good job of winning re-election for the first time, and what he really wanted to do was make sure that the lessons that he had learned on the campaign trail, that he could share that with the Muslim community and share that with other Muslims who want to run for office, both in Massachusetts and around the country, but also put that into essentially in writing, turn it into a training program, and essentially being really effective, using dollars very effectively and running grassroots campaigns. So what we do right now is we do two things really that we focus on. The bread and butter is training candidates who want to run for office in the future, so before they become candidates, because we're a 501c3 nonprofit. And then the other thing is public advocacy on issues that matter to the Muslim community. And I would say the third thing we're expanding on now is also doing more placements, et cetera, for people in politics. So, either as fellows and interns, or also helping people get jobs in politics, on campaigns, and in government in general.
So our show was taping just a Ramadan interfaith iftar, where we heard the speech of a great imam, and we also shared food, and there was interviews after, so our audience knows a little bit about what iftar is like, and how we open fast with certain foods and dates and dinner afterwards. Can you tell us about what your work with the Massachusetts Governor's Office for Ramadan, and why it's so important?
So this year we reached out to the Governor's Office, we reached out to the Senate, the Massachusetts Senate, and the Massachusetts House. And for the Governor, we asked for a proclamation to essentially just proclaim that the beginning of Ramadan, and if you look at the resolution online, you'll see that it also talks a little bit about, the importance of the contributions of the Muslim community, the fact that we are, a large community in the state, and that it dates back to the beginning of the country. People think of Muslims and they think of immigration, and that most of us came 50 years ago, 40 years ago. But the truth is, there are Muslims here who came who were enslaved people. So it dates back to the beginning of the country. So that's something that we want to put out there, obviously. But the other thing is just proclaiming Ramadan, the start of it, what it does, what it means. The Senate passed one yesterday, actually adopted a resolution, and the House adopted one last week. The meaning of it really is that I think, there's no secret to the Muslim community, but also to a lot of Americans, that for the last 22 years, we have sort of been forced into, segregation, into the shadows as a community, especially when it comes to civic participation. We're still trying to figure out really the extent of the mass surveillance that existed, the mass arrests that existed, and how that really the harm that it caused. But I think for us, it's building relationships with lawmakers accomplishes two things. It shows to our community that our government is welcoming of us now. We definitely didn't feel it, obviously, maybe even 6 years ago. Right. But it's the tide is changing. Our government wants to engage with us in a positive, in a civic way. So hopefully it'll encourage the Muslim community to get more engaged civically, to vote, obviously, but also to just engage in public advocacy with their elected lawmakers, but also for their lawmakers to acknowledge, yes, you're here. We acknowledge, you as a community, and we're happy that you're here, and we're proud of, your presence in the community.
So I'm going to ask a devil's advocate question. What do you say to those who are going to feel that, this is what I was afraid of, Sharia law is coming? Look at them, they're getting their month recognized, and they're asking Muslims to get involved. And what would you say to those people, and how should we respond to them to make their fears subside and say, no, that's really not the case? But there are going to be people who feel that way. What would you say to them?
I mean, I would say that we live in a multicultural democracy, right? In a multicultural society, and there are other religions that get acknowledged every single year that hasn't done any harm to the country, right? That we acknowledge that. If anything, it strengthens us. And I think when we are more inclusive as a society, when we acknowledge other religions and the fact that different people live here, we become a stronger democracy and we become a less divided democracy. So that's really what I would say back to that.
So going back to Jetpac, and I know Nadeem Mazen, he's excellent. I wasn't able to take advantage of Jetpac because I was elected before Jetpac was officially formed.
You broke barriers with your election. So
yes, and I wished I did go through the training and such, because I think I would have learned a lot more rather than learning from grassroots and like learning by fire. But could you tell us a little bit about what would the candidates learn? What is their training like? Because I think that would be a question that some people might ask is, what are you training your candidates, especially Muslim candidates?
Right. So, I mean, we do the basics, obviously, in terms of the ABCs of campaigns that are relevant to all candidates. So that's, what a good field plan looks like, right? How do you develop that? So it's from the beginning, obviously, through the end. It's how to develop your fundraising plan, how to make fundraising calls, how much time you should dedicate to these different things. We also train people on communications and media, how to handle those things if it's relevant. Obviously, like if you're running for school committee, potentially that media is different than if you're running for something bigger. And then we work on, what you're like, essentially how to present your policy. What are your values, right? Like, why are you running? That's really, really important.
Right.
I think sometimes people, I was having this conversation this morning with someone about, why do people run for office, right? And especially like now these days in general, like whether they're Muslims or people from other communities that are underrepresented, we saw a huge spike in people running for office and people being very excited about running for office. But, it's more than just, I want to do good for my community. There's a lot more that goes into it. Campaigns are essentially you're starting up a business in many ways, and especially if they get larger, which that involves many different elements. So we want to sort of make sure that people understand the incredibly special journey that they're going to embark on, and that includes a lot of tough elements of it. How do you staff up? How do you vet consultants? How do you figure out, for instance, the whole pie chart of spending once you have raised money, when you should start spending the money. But then in addition, as Muslim candidates, is how do you build an ecosystem around you to deal with the hate? Because there is no Muslim candidate running that doesn't face at some point some sort of vitriol. And I think the good thing is Muslim candidates are very successful. I would say our research shows that it's the success rate is more than 50% of when a Muslim runs for office. The likelihood of them winning a race is 50%. So that's really encouraging, and that's also that. Reminding them that a lot of the hate you're going to face is probably online. Unless you live in a very conservative place, chances are you have a lot of welcoming neighbors, and you have to focusing on acknowledging that part, and instead of getting lost in what's happening online.
So were there not other training organizations out there? I know one question could be, why did you have to create one specified for Muslims? Was there not other organizations or courses or classes that someone could have taken to learn the same things that you guys are giving to the Muslim candidates?
So we encourage people to check out other training programs and actually take them if they can, whether it's Emerge or, some other training program, because I don't think you can have enough training in life. But the thing that's different about our training, first of all, is that we do a lot more individualized training. So it's not necessarily always in a classroom with a lot of other people. We look at you and your journey as a candidate from before you become a candidate, and then, what happens after, right? Like what kind of relationship do you need to build? The other element of it is running as a Muslim is a very unique thing. It really is. You can run as a Muslim woman, which is also even more unique, right? So there's just, the challenges are very different. The network we've built of different alums in our network and different people they can reach out to, that support system is really important. And so, it matters. I think similarly to like a group existing specifically for women, for instance, right? Like it's addressing specific challenges.
Right. And I think a good point to make is that not all Muslim women wear hijab publicly.
That's right.
And, just coincidentally, I was talking to a local representative just saying that, she had said that somebody was a first Muslim woman. I said, but I've been there.
Yeah.
And just because my name isn't as open or looking like as a typical Muslim woman's name, or I'm wearing hijab, all of a sudden people just assume that we look like one people,
right,
or we wear the one type of clothing. We don't. We have diversity in that as well. Curious, when I saw this online, and I wanted to show it to our viewers, this is the Massachusetts proclamation
By the governor.
by the governor, recognizing Ramadan. And I actually went and read everything in the proclamation. Do you mind actually reading it out to us, to the viewers? Because I'm very curious if the viewers want to know what exactly was listed in this proclamation.
Sure. So it says, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a proclamation. Whereas Islam is one of the world's major religions and part of the shared faith traditions, and whereas Muslims have been a part of the fabric of North America since its inception and have contributed extensively to the advancement of our modern world, and whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is home to a large Muslim community and their Muslim faith is welcome and celebrated here, and whereas the Muslim community is one of the most racially diverse faith groups in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and has enriched the Commonwealth, and whereas Ramadan is the holiest month of Islam and marks the first revelation of the Quran, and whereas Ramadan marks a month-long spiritual journey of fasting and prayers for Muslims, and whereas Muslims practice self-control, discipline, sacrifices, and empathy for those who are less fortunate through acts of solidarity and charity, and whereas Ramadan begins at dusk on March 22nd, 2023, and lasts for one lunar month, with the first and last dates determined by the lunar Islamic calendar, now therefore I, Maura T. Healy, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim March 22nd, 2023 to be the commencement of Ramadan, and urge all the citizens of the Commonwealth to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance, given at the Executive Chamber, and it says when it was given.
The reason why I wanted you to read that out loud is because I wanted our viewers to understand what it meant by and exactly what it was proclaiming and recognizing. Do you feel that this will give, and this is my personal interest because I've been part of school committee for so long, do you feel that this will give kids in schools and teachers and administrators to maybe adhere, be cognizant of Ramadan more, Muslims more while they're fasting during this month, and look at it and be more sensitive to test dates and projects and etc. for school? Will this help that?
That's the goal, yes. So, I view this as the beginning of more understanding. I think if a message like this is given by the governor of Massachusetts, if you're a parent and you want to go to your school and have that conversation, my hope is that you feel less intimidated by that prospect, right? Because you go, I have the backing of the governor here that this matters, that this is part of the fabric of the state. And I do think what I'm hearing, is that more and more parents are feeling encouraged to do that. They're feeling less alienated, not just because, this obviously helps, but essentially, the goal is for these things to become annual traditions. We're also hoping to host an annual Eid al-Fitr at the State House as well, and hope that, the entire Muslim community can come from all over the state to showcase against the diversity in our community, both geographically here in Massachusetts, but also obviously the diversity of our community in general. So yeah, that's the goal here, is that this isn't just like one thing that's going to happen and you're here. It's more so going to trickle, turn into policies that help our community be part of this from a policy perspective.
The reason why I ask is I'm also part of a different school system. I have been invited as a guest to talk about holiday guidance, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the questions was, and I was hoping you could maybe enlighten some of your personal ideas and thoughts on this. When it comes to Ramadan, or even schools or workplace policies or state policies, what would you see wanting to happen? Is it just dates on a calendar? Is it recognizing the last 10 days? Mm-hmm. Is it recognizing just Eid al-Fitr? What is your views on this is the first step? And yes, it can affect the schools and state policies, but what exactly do you think pie in the sky are we aiming for?
I think it sort of should depend on the individual community because, again, we're a little bit different. It depends on how many people live somewhere. But, I think it would be ideal if the state was open to, or I should say individual districts rather, where, large Muslim populations live, are open to things like halal food options in school, just like they should be for kosher or vegetarian options as well. And that should be ushered in for students because that matters, right? I mean, I think as a Muslim, when you go through Ramadan and you don't eat, you don't drink, for several hours like we do, it's a reminder every single year of what hunger does to your body, right? What dehydration does to your body, and so that goes to that goes to show that the policies do impact that, right? So you want obviously halal food doesn't mean that there's no food if there's no halal food option, but it should help. Kids should have all kinds of food options available, and they should all have access to food guaranteed when they go to school because it matters. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is obviously recognition of Eid. I think by the schools would be nice, again, if there's a significant population. And what I always tell people is we really just have two major holidays. That's really about it.
Right.
It's Eid, the one right after Ramadan,
Right.
and then there's one obviously later on that we call, like jokingly, it's like little Eid and big Eid, right?
Yes.
And so, and that's about it, right? So like I don't think it's not really that much of an ask or that much of a thing. And the other, I think one of the challenges for policymakers is figuring out, because it's not one date a year, it sort of changes. That's going to be the looking at the nuances
Right.
like that. How do you make that happen, on an annual basis?
Right. This year we're all lucky because Eid is landing on April vacation in this state, and
Yeah.
my kids are excited because
course.
it's the first time that they get to celebrate the last 10 days of Ramadan in a manner that we would want to have, and Eid, they don't have to worry about Eid getting ready the day before after school, and then missing the day of and being tired the day after.
Right.
Excellent points. I'm going to ask you the same question that one of the representatives asked me during the iftar time, and was asking me for my opinion. And I was like, in my own show, it was the first time that someone turned around a question on me and started interviewing me. What would you say about MCAS during Ramadan?
Honestly, that's a great question. Because it's actually come up several times. And I mean, I think testing in general, that my personal opinion on testing is that it's a very flawed way to judge students. I think that's been proven empirically. So I would assume that it's even more harmful potentially during Ramadan. But honestly, I'm going to turn it on you and ask you, like, what have your parents said? I mean, what have your children said? You're a parent, and what do you think about it? I'm genuinely curious because you're also on you're on the school board, so you're the expert here.
I did mention it on the TV show, but I'll just repeat in case our viewers missed it. I think I have a very unique perception of MCAS. I do understand that we want our kids to graduate with a certain level of knowledge, and we want to validate that they do have that knowledge. And a lot of districts in the different areas of our school systems throughout Massachusetts are at different levels. 10th grade does not look the same as 10th grade somewhere else, right? So the only way for us to really assess, are all our kids getting at least the same level of standard knowledge before they graduate high school, is unfortunately by some sort of testing. So that given, I do understand and acknowledge that a lot of kids take testing differently. Some are great at it, some just, it's just a struggle because it's just not their way of showcasing their knowledge. But at the same time, I also look at testing as a way for children to be able to get ready to handle anxiety and handle stress. And I always said this to my kids, and I have 5 kids, most viewers know this, all of them are very different. All of them take tests differently, take anxiety differently, take stress differently. So I understand those parents that are telling me that my child didn't sleep all night because they were so anxious, or the week before, for the full week, my child was not eating, not sleeping, very anxious, and we had a really hard time because they were just stressed. Completely understand that. I've been there. But I always say to parents, and this is what my opinion is, take this opportunity because they're at the age at this point where parents are advisors to them, and we have some hope that they would listen to us. Maybe not when they're in their 20s, but at least at this age, they may take some of our advice, and we can give them tools to help alleviate those stress and make them be able to handle and manage stress better. The reason why I say that is because I want our schools to be able to give our kids the best chance to compete globally, not just compete locally. And if we're always saving them from anxiety and stress, the rest of the world is not. As we know in other countries, which I don't agree with, is they overstress their kids. And testing is the only way.
I grew up so my first grade and second grade was in Baghdad in Iraq. We were tested in terms of like being graded in the first grade at the time. And like I had to, like there were people who actually failed and had to be held back. So the pressure is definitely
the pressure is like the other extreme.
Right.
But those kids, and some of those kids, there's a percentage of those kids that learn how to handle anxiety and stress, and they're coming into the global economy, and our kids need to be able to compete also as well in the global world. And I always tell my kids, look, if you're having trouble and you're anxious, are you going to go to work and say, I was anxious and I didn't get my deadline done? It's not going to be really well. you're going to lose points on your performance. You're not going to do very well competitively globally. We got to figure out ways on how to manage it and how to deal with it. So I agree, for MCAS can be stressful for some kids, but I think we need to find ways to be able to test our kids so that they can be competitive globally and learn how to manage it. So I do understand the other side, but that's my point of view.
And what about Ramadan? Do you think it should be pushed back during Ramadan?
No, because for a couple of reasons. We know that in Ramadan we are taught that you try to still live your life the way you were living before. Like, don't take excuses. Don't make an excuse of I'm not eating, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I can't do this. Other than like running a marathon or doing something that is so extraneous on your body that you're going to hurt yourself, right? We are told, other than that, live your life as if you would have, regardless if you were fasting or not. So for that reason, I don't believe that MCAS should be pushed off, because I tell my kids, exactly, when you get into the workforce, be it a doctor, engineer, lawyer, cases are going to come up. People's lives are going to be affected. You cannot say, I'm fasting, I'm not going to do it today. So I feel that it's a learning experience for them. They need to learn how to manage it, and they need to learn how to maybe eat a better, suhoor at that time. Wake up a little earlier, eat a little bit more, eat more healthier that day. Learn your body, learn how much water that it really needs before fasting and then after fasting. I feel like it's just a learning experience.
Okay, no, points well taken.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit of maybe some, I guess, interesting moments that Jetpac has had with candidates? And you mentioned, Muslims have a hard time maybe with some, negative publicity or negative, thoughts and people who are afraid of the word Muslim or Islam or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a couple incidents and how you guys overcame that?
Also, we work with candidates before they run, right? So that's really the thing. I can share some personal stories instead, because I've been part of many campaigns. I'm a political consultant as well, so I do that work. So that's separate. But an interesting story is, if you're a Muslim candidate, no matter what, what you can be born here, you can be second, third generation, whatever. It doesn't matter. At some point, someone's going to ask you about foreign policy issues. That trope of if you're Muslim, you somehow have an opinion on something that's happening somewhere else in the world, it exists. And you can run for dog catcher, and they're going to ask you about some foreign policy issues. And so that always comes up. That always, is can be very challenging for some people, because it's not like everyone grows up thinking about what foreign policy views they have, right? Some people obviously think about it, others don't. And it puts a lot of pressure on people, I would say. And so on the Jetpac side, before they become candidates, is something we train them on. We ask them straight up, we tell them this could come up. If you're Turkish, they're going to ask you something related to Turkey. If you're Pakistani, they're going to ask you something about that, right? So either way, they're going to ask you these questions. So you need to be prepared for that, even though, again, you should only ask someone running for Congress, frankly, these questions, and no other community gets it. So that's one thing, something that always comes up is that. Otherwise, it's unfortunate. I think you have to look at these things and just go, you have to turn it into something positive for you and realize this is why you're doing it.
Right.
I think that's really it. Every single candidate I've ever worked with who's Muslim at some point, faces a lot of different hate. And it doesn't sound the most, intuitive thing, but you sort of have to lean into it and go, this is why I'm running.
Right.
I'll just, water off my back, whatever. I'll let it, it's not the greatest feeling, obviously. It's uncomfortable, but I'm also not going to care about it. So It's not the most, honestly, I can't share with you the most interesting things, unfortunately. I can't share those things on the record, so
that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. We have a couple of minutes left. Are
Sure.
there any other areas of Jetpac or your experience that you'd like to share with the audience?
I would just say, if you're interested in running, you should absolutely do trainings. You should do trainings like Jetpac. You should contact us and figure out. But there are also just a lot more things we can offer. We can just have a conversation about if you want to figure out a way into politics. If you're in high school or in college and you're interested in working in politics or in government, reach out to us. We'll work with you on how to, develop those relationships, how to put together your resume, how to, think about applying for these things and even interviewing. So
How did you get involved? Like, what was your path?
I came here for college, and I knew that I wanted to focus on something related to, making the world a better place, frankly, because I was a child refugee, and I always knew like that was my inclination. I just wasn't sure which direction. Was it going to be law? Was it going to be journalism? When I started college here, I went to Suffolk University. I learned very quickly through some professors the impact that local government has. And so I got more and more interested in that. My focus in college was American government through political science. And then I interned at the State House. And I really, really learned like just the massive impact in this kind of democracy, that we have, that you can have on the local level. So I applied for work after college, and I ended up getting a job in the House as a legislative aide. After that, I worked in the Senate. And then, Jetpac came along, and that was very much a calling for me because I really want to see more representation of Muslims and other underrepresented groups.
Can someone contact Jetpac if they're not Muslim?
Yes, we work with allies as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've helped, we've trained people who are Latinx, we've trained, people from other communities as well.
Sounds good. We have about like a couple minutes left, but I am going to start wrapping up. Both Mohammed and myself are fasting today, so we're actually almost around the corner where almost there, where we're about to open our fast. So I'm going to give ourselves a few minutes to get ready for that. But what we learned today is Muslims running for office is really about us trying to give back to our community that we grew up to love and that we call our home. And I think, like as Mohammed was saying, that a lot of Muslims do win campaigns because of the dedication that they have to their community. And I'm speaking for myself. That's why I ran as well. Even though I ran during a time where it was, I had to pretty much even hide it from my own family for a while, because if I had told my family I was running, they would have said, why are you doing this? Why are you attracting attention? You're going to get negative attention. It's just dangerous out there. Nobody wants to hear about Muslims. And but I think like this first and second generationers are saying, this is our country and we need to give back. So thank you for joining us again, and I hope you join us for our next episodes, and we're going to have great shows coming forward with perspectives with Asima Silva.